Jordan, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here today. But a lot of people don't know who you are, what you're about, and what brought you here to Atticus. So if you could, just give us some background. Like, who are you? What have you been doing? And what are you up to?
Yeah. Man, I wanted to be a lawyer my entire life, having no idea what that means, and I still feel like I don't know what that means. But eventually that led me to be a prosecutor, and then in 2015, my wife and I opened up our firm, originally doing criminal defense, ended up moving to PI. So in those first like 3+ years as a prosecutor and about 4 for criminal defense, in the Central Florida community, I know 2 people who retired, both of them solely because their wives' companies got bought out. And I know a lot more who are unfortunately no longer with us for heart attack, stroke, suicide, abandoned their firm, and wandered off somewhere else to do something else. And so as I kept growing the firm, I kept coming back to how do we stay in this for the long haul? Turns out the long haul ended up getting myself out of the firm into more of a CEO role and then ultimately into coaching when I realized all of these other attorneys wanted help doing the same thing. And so wonderful to be here at Atticus and with my podcast being rebranded as From Esquire to Owner, really trying to drive that information, helping people out of the day to day and into truly owning a firm.
You're unique in that you practiced. You're unique in that you were actually, at one point, I think you came to double your revenue that I taught years ago. And you're unique in that you've been through the whole gamut of experience of building and transferring your own practice, selling your own practice. Then you went to one-on-one coaching consulting, and then you joined us just recently. What was it that made you transition from practicing to really being a coach, consultant, and advisor? What was the desire behind that?
My son is 8 years old. He was born on March 2nd of 2018. So I wish I remember the exact date, but the middle of 2017, my wife told me she was pregnant. We had been struggling for a year to get pregnant. I was sitting at my breakfast bar. She slid me hot sauce and it had "You're going to be a hot daddy" on it, which amazing. I wish I had framed this moment so much better because I was obviously super happy. Like I said, we've been trying for a year. And then immediately after that, just that existential dread of we're $200,000 in debt on the firm, we're working a million hours, where everything's tough, and now going to hand us a baby. And so out of that moment became the, well, what do we have to do differently, right? Nothing changes if you don't change. So I made the decision to stop being a lawyer and go into being a marketer and running the firm. She made the decision to go oversee the attorneys. We had, I think, 5 attorneys at the time, 15 people, very similar size to that, what you've mentioned, and that spot where you hate everything at the company. And like that was the beginning of this. So that got me through my version of the journey. And then as I started kept talking about it, people were like, oh, we want that. We want out of the day today. We want to run a second company. We want to be able to go for a 13-month cross country road trip. Like, help us do that.
Why did joining Atticus become part of that path for you?
So, all right, this is going to be very specific. I want to live to the year 2100, specifically March 1st. It would make me 112. I found out there is not actually a leap year every 4 years because that would be too much. So at the hundreds, there is not a leap year except every 400 years. So there was one for 2000. There will not be one for 2100. So I want to at least see a not leap year leap year. So from that, I go to a longevity doctor and he gives me this whole thing and here's what we need and this is what it looks like for you now being, in your mid to late 30s to be 112. And I was like, well, hey, who else works with you? And he said, well, it's just me. I was like, well, God forbid, what happens if something happens to you? And he had like the light bulb moment. And then immediately afterwards, I had the light bulb moment. I was like, holy crap. What happens to my clients if I get hit by a bus, right? There's no transition, there's no support. And so I was talking to our good friend Victor Medina about some of my frustrations being solo and stuff. And so he made the connection here. And then Mark Powers, our CEO, had me redo my lifetime legacy and the impact I want to have on the legal community and the flexibility I want to be able to travel with my family. And, a lot of the other things that showed up in there that were not an attorney, Atticus is going to help me achieve those more. And I hope to help Atticus achieve our goals more and help that many more lawyers achieve their goals for their great practice and great lives.
So, when you think about high risk decisions for yourself or coaching a client through high risk decisions, what are the four most important things that you think about or help people frame out?
Well, okay, so before we get into those, I want to really focus on what is the real risk and what is the actual decision. Because I think it's easy for us to say, like, hey, I'm deciding between this and that. But until we get specific on the real decision, what actually has to be made, it's really hard to start evaluating it. And then ultimately, like, what is risk? Because I mean, to go into the 4-part framework, like most decisions are meaningless. And hopefully that's liberating, right? I know for our S's for dis that might be terrible, but it's a good thing, right? Like we can only make so many good decisions. This is why Steve Jobs wore the black turtleneck and the same pants every single day, because it's one less decision. If you're sitting on your deathbed, most of the decisions are absolutely meaningless. You will never think about them again. So I want you to just create rules and systems to get through those so that for the real decisions, you can truly focus more on them.
Define risk for me. I know it sounds strange, but different people have different interpretations of what risks mean. What does it mean to you?
To me, risk is the potential outcome of some sort of situation multiplied by the belief that it will happen that way. I think that's a very lawyerly case analysis risk standpoint.
So is all risk negative or risk positive, or how are you positioning risk? When I hear risk, I hear is negative.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about kids briefly. I remember my wife coming to me and saying, "Hey, do I order the crib that is a 0.00000001% chance of killing our child, or the one that's the 0.0000000001% chance?" Right? Like everything has risk. Everything. And there so what we can do as lawyers is figure out the potential likelihood of success and apply that to the right situation because I hate to break it to you, everything is risky and we only have so much time. So every decision is a yes to something, is a no to something else. But again, that's why most of the things are meaningless. And so when they're meaningful is when you really have to sit down and do the really good analysis of the risk of this decision versus the reward to make the decision on what to do.
Got it. So if you're coaching someone through that process, how do you help someone test decisions before they commit to them?
It depends upon the decision, but most things are testable. Right? It is amazing to me how easy it is to go shadow somebody else. I remember I was in 6th grade, we had to do job shadowing. My grandmother was at an adult living facility with the mom of a judge, and so she made the connection. So I got to go spend a day with a judge and the prosecutors and PDs in front of him and try it out. And then when I went to UCF, I got to be on the trial team and I got to try out arguing fake cases in front of attorneys and judges. And then I became a prosecutor, which is not no risk, but like you show up, hey, you have 200 files. These 8 are set for trial in 20 minutes. Go see if you like this. There are different ways to test these things that are not, we're not Vikings. We don't have to go to a hostile shore and burn all the boats and not be able to come back. So figure out what the test is on this thing.
What do you think the lawyers who are getting ready to open their practice struggle with the most?
I think the biggest thing for me was how could I mitigate the risk? And so like I was a prosecutor. I spoke to 30 something defense attorneys. One of them offered me cheap rent from him and would give me some cases in the counties he didn't want to handle. And so for me, that was it. I was like, all right, great. I have enough coming in here that I know I'm not going to go destitute. And in retrospect, if it sucked and I didn't generate what I was looking for, I could go find a job somewhere else having a little bit varied experience. Instead, I hit my number of so I left in October. I had a number I wanted to make by the end of the year. I did that in 5 days. Now, mind you, it was all from him sending me 3 cases, but it was a great proof of concept before I could start generating my own work.
If there's a lawyer listening now and they're thinking about opening up their own practice, what would be the first piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, so to go back through our framework, this is definitely not a meaningless decision. So forget that one. Can you test this? Is there an opportunity? Are you currently incentivized to generate work at your current firm and you can look at how much you generate versus if you could afford to live off of that generation? Can you do pro bono work on the type of cases you want to take if you transition the practice? Can you go can will your firm let you do a sabbatical or a clerking for a judge or something like that so you can get a chance to try something different knowing you have the flexibility of coming back? Figure out what that test looks like would be the first thing. And then I go back to the Clio Trends report where the average solo attorney makes, I think, $68,000 a year. The average lawyer is in there $90,000 a year. So your solo attorney risk of financial problems are to go work for somebody else for $20,000 a year more on average. I don't think that one really factors in, although that's something that people worry about day one. That was my main focus. How much money am I going to make? And then know you're going to be happy with it. And if you're not, please, please, please make changes. Sometimes it's the practice area. Sometimes it's bringing in a coach. Sometimes it's closing up shop and going to work for somebody, knowing you tried it. But I think at the end of the day, like, Dan Pink has the book Power of Regret. So many people I talk to regret the decisions they don't make. They didn't regret the one that they did that they had to undo later because at least then they tried it.